Hello traders and listeners, Patrick Maldonado here, cryptocurrency trader and creator of TCE Trading. In today's episode, I would like to ask the following question. Are Bitcoin and gold good investments? I will tell you my opinion on this combined with some important knowledge on inflation and alternative investment assets. Before starting, I would appreciate if you leave a review and share the podcast. It supports me and really makes a difference. Once again, thank you guys for joining, for listening to this podcast. I hope that you are doing great. Now, I want to be upfront. This is the first time I'm kind of creating a separate kind of class for this episode. You know, it's kind of like mainly my opinion. Most of this episode will be based on my personal opinion and experiences with these assets, yeah, right? And this is just to mark a little bit of difference with the ones that I'm only talking really about crypto. In the future, I'm also thinking about doing some specifically for reviews and so on. But in any case, that's for the future. Now, just before going again, I am not an investment advisor and this is not financial advice. And you might be wondering why everyone pretty much says this when, if you look at YouTube videos and so on. And to be honest, after doing a specialization on investment management, the real reason is because if you want to give advice, you really need to know the profile of the person. An advice has to be tailored to someone, right? So you cannot really be giving advice just to anyone because it might not be the case for every person out there. And also you might need certain licenses depending on what you are talking about. So this is why everyone and their mothers are saying that they're not financial advisors. I thought that you might find this interesting, so I just wanted to throw that into the podcast. But in any case, please consider that I try not to be clouded by exuberance. There's some Bitcoin fans, moonboys, hodlers. They might perceive my views as negative, even though they are mainly positive. So take this into consideration. But before talking more about my opinion, I want to talk about some definitions. First of all, inflation. What is inflation? Well, it's basically the decline of purchasing power of a given currency over time. Okay, so as opposed to what people might want you to believe, and this is very noticeable in the cryptocurrency community, they will say that inflation is the worst, that is almost compared to Satan and things like this. But inflation can be both positive or negative depending on the rate of change. Now, generally, if inflation goes up alongside a country's economy, it is said to be very healthy. You want inflation to be growing while the economy is growing. That's an important part of modern finance. What you want to avoid really is when inflation is going up, but the economy is shrinking, because this might lead to hyperinflation. And you have seen the likes of countries like Venezuela, countries like Iran, countries like Argentina, that they have serious problems with their currencies. Now, inflation is mainly controlled by central banks and their decisions on interest rates. If interest rates are high, money tends to be more valuable and vice versa. If interest rates are low, you might not really want to have an accumulation of cash in the bank because it's basically doing nothing. It's basically losing value due to this inflation that is going to happen regardless of anything else. Now, another thing that you might want to consider, and one of the main reasons Bitcoin was created, is because of how governments can basically print money. This is a serious factor to consider. Now, just to put an example for you to imagine, if you had $100 in the year 2000, now I'm not going to go all the way back to the 19th or whatever, just to make this example, but just think about in the last 20 years, if you had $100, that would approximately be equivalent to $148.5 around today. And that's without counting the 2020's pandemic effect, because surely that's really gonna increase the inflation over time, and that's really gonna have an impact on this figure, but basically that's a loss of investment power of almost 50%, and this is huge. Now, traditionally, equities are seen as the best hedge against inflation. Whenever you see the dollar currency index or currencies in general going down, again, potentially because of inflation, equities tend to go up. But this is where gold and Bitcoin really come into play, because gold can serve as kind of like an insurance to a portfolio. And the reason is because it's relatively rare and its value often doesn't move in line with other assets such as equities or property, right? And in fact, whenever there's uncertainty and the market tumbles, gold tends to benefit. If you have listened to my previous episodes, you might have seen this at the beginning of 2020, after the markets tumble from this pandemic. Gold really recovered, and it not only recovered, it really rallied past it over the last highs, the latest all-time high that it had. So it went past beyond that, and this is very important. The reason again is because when there's uncertainty, people tend to turn to gold mainly. Now, if you have listened to my previous episodes on Bitcoin, you will know that Bitcoin shares a lot of properties with gold, and mainly it's about limited supply, or what people know as scarcity, right? And this is a huge part, again, that I've already talked about Bitcoin. And for this reason, a lot of people see Bitcoin kind of like gold 2.0, and those think it's a good hedge against economic uncertainty and inflation. And again, this might be in the future. It's still kind of difficult. Bitcoin is in a very difficult position because it's mainly speculative, right? And this is where my opinion really comes into play, now that I have talked about inflation and talked a little bit about gold and Bitcoin as potentially these hedges of the economy against uncertainty and against inflation. Because in terms of a long-term safe, and when I'm saying safe, I mean with some air quotes, serious air quotes, in terms of a long-term safe portfolio, I would still favor a combination of both fixed income bonds and equities. Again, this is only my opinion, right? And my opinion is based on a lot of the research that I've done, a lot of the information that I obtained of different certificates, different courses, combined with my personal experience. But the reason behind this is because both of these assets generate income, okay? Income is the word for me in this case. Bonds generate interest for you, and equities may generate dividends. And even though I love Bitcoin and I think its price might still go up in value due to several factors, it does not add any income to your portfolio. And it's just the same with gold. They do not add income. There's nothing like, an organization that's working, that's creating value. It's just what they are. They might be a reserve of value in specific circumstances, but they do not generate income. Now, I truly believe that they are a tremendous way to diversify your portfolio, but still they're gonna be very risky. And something that a lot of people miss is that they focus so much on scarcity and supply and demand, and they say Bitcoin has to go up, that they forget that about 3% of Bitcoin holders hold the majority of the existing supply, right? This is no different from stocks. This is not different from major investments or for, traditional finance, where the 1% or just a minority really has most of the power. And this is the case for Bitcoin, because a lot of people talk about how decentralized it is, but in reality, in practice, it's not as decentralized as people think. It really only takes one of these whales to really sell thousands of Bitcoin, and Bitcoin could potentially crash. In any case, in terms of investments, this will all depend very specifically on your profile and your goals, which again is why none of this is investment advice. Now, just to finish kind of this episode, I want to say that in my opinion, Bitcoin is not the best asset to buy and hold, okay, as traditional investments are concerned. Why? Because its volatility, because it can be very, very unpredictable in some ways. And again, a lot of people might, hate on this idea, but I'm talking about serious positive things regarding regarding Bitcoin, but in some aspects, you need to be cautious. For example, if you bought at the end of 2017 or maybe at the beginning of 2018, you would barely break even after 3 years of holding, right? And this is very important because people usually just think about Bitcoin. Oh yes, but if you buy at 3K, if you buy at the lows, you have made maybe 4, 5, 6 times your investment, and that's true. But not everyone is gonna buy at those times. And if you want to think about investments, usually you would think, regardless of the price, you would think more about the time you are holding it, and this is not really true as of right now, at least for Bitcoin. In any case, I personally think that Bitcoin shines the most at position trading, and that's a topic that I will discuss more in the next episode of the TCE Trading podcast. But again, in my opinion, Bitcoin is not that good for as a long-term investment, mainly because you can not only lose in terms of opportunity cost, because potentially if you bought at 19,000 in 2018, and then it went all the way to 3,000, you are missing a lot of potential in there. Whether if you have taken a strong position for the longer term, maybe at 3,000 or maybe a short from 19,000 or so on, you might have really benefit from that. But again, that I will be talking more about that in another episode. In any case, traders and listeners, I hope you enjoyed this episode of the TCE Trading podcast. It is essential to know about investments and the different asset classes so you do not lose your wealth to inflation. Bitcoin and gold can be very valuable against inflation, so do your research and learn more about their benefits before investing. If you are interested in learning how to trade crypto, gold, or forex, be sure to check out my webpage at www.tctrading.com. Thank you very much for listening, and I will see you in the next episode. Take care.